Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're chiming into this webinar, both taped and potentially live. We are hosting our 12th episode of season 2, and we've done this in 3 installments. We've been insane enough to actually have 3 webinars, webcasts today. This one, we're focused on the 2020 Futureproofing Awards, and with a particular focus on business models, ecosystems, talent, and transformation. My name is Sean Moffitt. I am joined by my talented co-host, Andrea Kates. Say hi, Andrea.
Say everyone.
Excellent. And then we will more formally introduce 2 very smart panelists in our discussion. And the agenda is pretty loose on this one. We want to surface some of the best companies and organizations and brands that have actually seen the future and maybe have acted to get there a little bit quicker than most. And so we're going to be surfacing them in these 4 categories today. There we are again. And Joanne, as always, our very capable community manager, kind of pulling the strings behind the curtain. I just saw this as of a few hours ago, and I thought it might be an interesting kind of intro to this particular discussion. Wired just posted something about the future of commerce belongs to the frictionless, and had a number of good examples. We're talking business models, at least first out of the gate today. And they profiled this group called the Mint House, and they essentially have very few staff in their hotel. Their rooms are about 3 times the size of regular hotels. And what might normally in a normal pre-pandemic time be considered a minus, you might want that high-touch contact. Certainly, given the fact, March, everything stopped for most of the world, has actually led them to have an occupancy rate that's about 4 times higher than the average upscale hotel. So I know we've got a chief medical officer on here. I know healthcare has completely virtualized itself almost overnight. I know we've got a person that's into kind of a manufacturing, but like a kind of with a particular bent on personal care. And so I think that's probably radically changed. So I thought it was an interesting intro into our discussion today. Just to intro this further, I know our nominations will be starting next Monday. So we're going to have an open nomination process to the world with 16 different categories of Futureproofing Awards. And so as much as we love to consider ourselves experts on the world of future-proofing, there's always that rare Norwegian company that we've never heard of that surfaces, that crazy pizzeria in Arkansas, or that remarkably wonderful thing in Nairobi that we just don't have access to. And so we're opening this up to the world to actually identify for us. And my hope is our 2 panelists today will agree to be judges on the back end of this whole process as we surface who might be the best.
Absolutely.
Here are 16 categories that we're going through. Today, we have a particular focus on the bottom row: business models, ecosystems, talent, and transformation. It's kind of a very dynamic set of 4 things. And I've been told, and I kind of know that our panelists will be able to rise their A game to our discussion today. Andrea, before we get started on introducing our panelists, any introduction to our discussion that you'd like to make?
I think it's really interesting. There's something called recency when you decide that you're going to evaluate a staff member and they just did something incredible like the day before, so you give them a 10, forgetting that they had been maybe not doing that, or vice versa. They messed up within the past month, but 11 months of great stuff. So I think that we, at least I know when I was picking, I was suffering a bit from recency because this pandemic, it's hard for me to remember that it's only been in 2020. So I was trying to take the long view, but I think it's just, this recency and the ability to now look backwards and see who was preparing to be a resilient future-proofer before and what they ended up doing, I think is going to be super interesting.
Yeah, it's tough not to be influenced by the pandemic, certainly in this row, because I think, yeah, it's definitely affected my judgment as well. Why don't you introduce our panelists, Andrea?
Well, they're 2 of our favorite future proofers, Moises Norena, who is with Fortune Brands and VP of Innovation, and he'll talk a little bit more perhaps in context about what he's been up to, what he's allowed to share. And then George Matthew, I love the story that we met in Lisbon. We both live in the US, but we were part of a community in Lisbon, and I knew that he was a future proofer. And actually, to be honest, George, I wouldn't mind if also when you speak up first, if you give a bit about a little mini commercial on what DXC technology is doing. So you can feel free when you do your first appearance to tell us a little bit of a little commercial. So
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Sean and Andrea, both for letting me join this today. Andrea, as you know, I've become kind of a fan over the last couple since we met in Lisbon, and I did see Dan Kraft later on in Sao Paulo, and I said hi. He seemed shocked. So DXC Technology is a merger of two older companies. The old EDS company, H. Ross Perot, that was sold to Hewlett Packard and then sold to another company called CSC. Back about 4 years ago. Together, they've been about a $22 billion global IT vendor. We're in 71 countries. We cover 8 verticals. Healthcare is the largest vertical. And, you know, my role was to be the chief medical officer for our state and local business, along with all of other healthcare sectors. The original business was Medicaid claims processing. We were in 42 out of 50 states. It's a pretty big business. And then on top of that, we do insurance companies, hospitals, life sciences companies, you name it. And a lot of it's all digital transformation, trying to help people figure out what they need to be to survive for the future. So you can imagine, not only did we gravitate to each other in Lisbon, but I started reading as much as I could because you seem to be describing where my job needed to go. My beat is really North and South America. I have counterparts in the rest of the world. But my goal is to try to be, to inject some healthcare experience and subject matter expertise into what we do and help our clients deliver better care to people that they're taking care of. That's
great
it.
commercial. So back to you, Sean.
Well, it's always a good panelist too that avoids my careful misspelling of his title and just bypasses it like it's just one smooth thing. So the last thing put into the deck is the worst thing spelled. So thanks for letting that one go, George. Chief Medical Officer.
I don't mind being a chiefy. It's okay.
It translates somewhere, I'm sure. But all right, we thought we've got 4 different categories. We got 4 smart people. We're gonna just take one of these at a time and parse them out. The first one is business models. I'm going to go off screen here and we can see all of us. And maybe Moises, we'll start with you in terms of just a nominee that you ran across that maybe has seen the future quicker than most and is in the business model arena of companies that you appreciate.
Yeah, you know, I have listened to Andrea talk a few times, and I know she always mentions Amazon as a company that is future-proof. So I thought I'd pick one that it's actually Amazon-proof, which is something that it's you know, hard to do these days, and that is Shopify. I think it's a company that found a way to fill a market need that Amazon could not with unique value. Basically has a you know, different business model than Amazon. Rather than coming to my platform, I help you create your own platform, customize it, make it you, but in a very simple way. And you know, I think the proof that they are Amazon proof is that they just recently had a deal with Walmart. So for me, that's a very future-proof company that it's actually, as you mentioned, it's hard to forget about the pandemic, but I think the pandemic has actually made them even stronger. So that's my pick.
Great pick. As a Canadian, I appreciate you on that one too. I've paid nothing for that one. So awesome to get us started. George, what was your nominee in this camp?
I'm going to start by warning everybody, all my choices are healthcare based because I'm a healthcare guy. So please forgive me my bias. When I look at healthcare, and specifically in the US, but also globally, I'm looking for something that's actually going to try to do what we haven't been able to do in decades, which is bring healthcare back to the patient. And that's not just by having a doctor-patient relationship, but also a business model that's transforming it as well. So one of the companies that's been started here in the New York City area is a company called Savvy.coop, and it's a public benefit corporation. What they do is they actually have found patients that have chronic conditions, and they're using surveys and finding consulting engagements to actually help them collect their own data, and then creating relationships with large healthcare incumbents as a way to basically bring the expertise of their being a patient, their experience, to these companies. Now, It's not a settled model. They're still pivoting, as you might imagine, because a lot of healthcare companies don't know how to deal with a patient as a partner. But I think that is the future, where before we've been trying to categorize patients as somebody who received care or advice, or someone that we need to work around and get paid. The future is collaboration with patients, and the way that's going to be is through their data. And this company, as a cooperative, pulls in the financial value of that and shares it equally throughout the cooperative. I'm actually a member of the cooperative. I feel like I'm advertising the hair club for men. So bad example, but because I'm a client too. But I believe that this will be, as we forecast the future for platforms and how people will engage with their healthcare, it'll be communities, digital communities that engage and make things happen.
Yeah, you're mining two very interesting areas. Health, I mean, if I term it, industries that are looking at disruption of themselves, both pre and post-pandemic, health is probably one of them. And plus you then throw on communities and collaboration, and you're in the sweet spot, I think, for business models. Yeah. Andrea, how about your nominee in this category?
Well, boom. I just happened to pick something before I knew what they were picking that bridges both. So there we go. I've got a Walmart angle and I got a healthcare angle. It's called Fresh Try. It's called Fresh Try.
Okay.
And it's Dr. Kyra Bobinet, who she's worked with us before in terms of the evil side of being hooked on technology. She was trained by someone named BJ Fogg at Stanford, who's kind of in our wheelhouse in terms of habits. He wrote a book called One Healthy Habit. So her company is called Fresh Try. And the reason that I think it's interesting is it bridges the Walmart as well as the healthcare. The model is that it's putting the habit formation, one healthy habit, into the hands of the patient. And don't know if this is going to be the one that wins ultimately, but certainly this is in the wheelhouse of if Andrea intends to not eat a donut for breakfast, but it's like the marshmallow test, like I can't help but eat that donut. It's just the mindset of, not doing what we want to do. So this tries to use brain science and AI to help Andrea make an individual, as a patient, as a human decision. The reason that I think it's interesting is that it's on the individual basis. It's based on this One Healthy Habit BJ Fogg stuff, which I think has been proven successful in terms of habit changing. It's also based on being able to, like every company says, oh, we'll give you a cheaper health insurance policy if you just stop smoking. And like, we all lie. We tell them that we drink one glass of wine a week, whatever. So this is trying to really work with the employer. And I think that instead of making it an adversarial relationship, Walmart was one of their test cases. So I'm watching them with tremendous interest to see if there's a way that the employer and the individual can kind of merge. And to George's point, keep the data private, because you don't necessarily want your employer knowing everything about you. And that has been a patient record system issue for years. So that's my pick, Fresh Try. Kyra Bobinet is the CEO, a woman, doctor.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great
well,
pick.
there you go. Good stuff. I haven't hit the healthcare button yet, so there's no duplication here yet. I went Adidas on one of them. I always love to see large companies that actually introduce kind of edge kind of models to what they're doing. And so there was two that they've launched. One's called Avenue A, which is kind of like an influencer friendly version of themselves. So you think of Adidas in terms of, those are the people that produce millions of shoes and they come out in boxes. Avenue A is kind of more of an exclusive. We're going to give you stuff like almost like American Express frontal line for shoes. They've also introduced another business model where you yourself can become an Adidas sneaker store owner. So they've collaborated with a company called Store. And with very little understanding of tech or commerce or anything really, you can actually build your own sneaker store, obviously fueled by Adidas products. So I thought good for them in terms of just looking at what technology it allows and also some democratization of what they're doing. The other one I had was the Trade Desk, which may be completely off of everybody's radar screen, but there's this incestuous thing about the media world where the people that sell the things oftentimes own the things that they're selling to. So it's putting the rabbit in with the lettuce. There's a thing called the Trade Desk, which is an open and independent programmatic advertising model where, I love their tagline, transforming media for mankind. And I think implicit in their promise is the notion that look, we've got open APIs. We're completely independent. We don't own anything we're selling. And if you want to plan your media like most people do nowadays through some type of interface, we promise you that we'll give you an objective analysis of who you should be targeting and if those people are real or not. So I thought they were a pretty good idea for a business model.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move to our second category, and it's kind of related to business models, I suppose, but it might even be broader, called ecosystems. So which companies or organizations have seen the future and have built ecosystems around themselves with it? Maybe Amazon proof, maybe whatever proof they need to be. George, you have the conch.
Okay, I'm going to pick Intermountain Health as my ecosystem play. Intermountain has done what most hospitals fear to do, which is look at their business model and kick it, not in the tires, but in the engine itself, and see, how do we rebuild this better? What they've been doing over the last couple of years has been nothing short of amazing. They just, for example, they were upset with how expensive drugs were getting, specifically generic drugs. Whenever they use it, those medications for their patients, it would drive the cost of care up. So they thought out of the box, partnered with a bunch of other hospital systems, and created their own generics company called Civica RX. And now it's actually going to start delivering some of their first drugs, if it hasn't already, in the next couple of months. And to me, that's extreme. That's building your own ecosystem. You need to treat, you need to be in an affordable way, and they're still true to the mission of taking care of the patient. So if you can't get it, you build it. So that's my pick.
And what's their introduction? There's the company, but for a regular Joe and Josephine consumer, is it Civic RX or is it?
Civica RX is a generics company. So Intermountain Health itself, right, out of Salt Lake City, Utah, big hospital system, was built out of I think almost a dozen Mormon hospitals that were then given to become a private entity and told to compete for the 21st century. So they've redesigned themselves several times over the last 20 years. But this is the first time they've stepped out of their traditional business model and said, we need to build a drug company because that's the only way we can cost effectively treat our patients. There aren't a lot of hospitals that have the mental horsepower and the finances to do that.
Yeah.
And they're doing it.
Wow. Nice and great, and just breaking as well, which we always like to have at Futureproofing next year. So so thank you for that. Moises, you were a nominee for an ecosystem play.
I have most companies that I picked are not related to my work, so hopefully I'll find one that it's more related to the work that we do at Moen. But for ecosystems, I picked one that may not be as familiar with a lot of people, but it's a huge company. It's called Mercado Libre. It's actually a company that was born in Argentina and started as the eBay of Latin America, but really has grown to become really an ecosystem of commerce that is very hard to get out of. When you think about what they built now, it's a combination of eBay, Amazon, real estate, grocery delivery. It's just really all for everyone. And incredibly enough, they're one of the best performing stocks in the New York Stock Exchange, which is one that not a lot of people know because we're not familiar in the US with it, but has a tremendous ecosystem around it that once you're in, it's hard to get out.
It's like The Godfather, isn't it? Like now
they pull you back in.
Pull you back in again. That's great. So I mean, and so it functions as an eBay, but so much more than eBay. Is that kind of?
Well, it's really a commerce platform, but it's not only peer-to-peer. It also has stores, large supermarkets. It's really a master commerce company.
Nice.
Moises, is there any other international comp that you would like? Anything in China, anything in India that would be similar at all to Mercado Libre?
I think Alibaba might be a little bit, but it's also compared to WeWe. I think it's a combination. It has its uniqueness to it. What I found interesting as far as the ecosystems goes is that has all this data and then leverages insights from consumers to even now to real estate, which is something you would not see in a commerce company traditionally.
Definitely.
Very cool. Andrea, ecosystems.
Yeah,
Go.
well, I picked one in Japan, Shimizu. We've worked with them. They are a very unlikely pick because they have not yet made their play. And there's nothing proprietary in what I'll share, but I watch their moves, and what they are is a very traditional kind of construction real estate, very kind of, company that would be going slowly into a shrinking mode now, because in Japan, the new building projects are probably down. The population is probably not growing really big. So what they've done is they have committed to a big open innovation center. And I think that it's really a head turner when they start doing that. And it's someone that we really respect, who's been chosen to go do that work. And so for a company that's of a very different, very traditional mindset in kind of, traditional construction, to decide that they're looking outside of Japan, they're looking to create tech, to really get digitally savvy, to have ambitions outside. As we know, in future-proofing, the mindset and the desire is the first step. And so I would predict, I'm trying to sort of be future-proofy, where I see an early sign of something to watch. And I believe that that company just made a move that is a head turner.
Very good. Very good. My two nominees, certainly the first one, I'm enough to be dangerous on this one just because George will probably check me on it and ask me a hard question afterward. But essentially our third biggest telco in Canada is called Telus. And so Telus is, I guess you would liken it to a Sprint or whatever in the US. They made a aggressive early investment in healthcare. They thought the future of connecting to people would be also connecting to patients and care. This was pre-pandemic, so lo and behold, now we're in a pandemic where a lot of this service delivery is being actually enabled through digital connections. And so they have a thriving division called Telus Health, and they have a network of partners now that I think trade off of some of their base business, but it's a standalone business unto itself as well. So if you think, wow, there was a prevailing trend that got them there, but now they're really in the midst of, wow, I wonder what their two biggest competitors are going to do now in the rest of the countries to catch up to them, because they've probably got 2 or 3 years advance practice in terms of doing this. The other one I put on my list was MyoVision, another Canadian company. Everybody talks about smart cities, but it always feels like the dream of the future. And so MyoVision's being able to actually create a patchwork quilt of partners that create solutions for smart cities. So essentially, if you want traffic flow in your city to be better, they've got pretty good at actually understanding the technology, but also understanding which vendors need to be part of that technology to actually make smart cities happen. And so if you jump on their website, they'll profile a lot of their different solutions that are all centered around not necessarily inventing things, but configuring things to make them work in a smart city setup. So those are my two there. All right, we're going to change to, I don't know if it's the softer side of things, but certainly when we look at AI and things that are coming, a lot of times we term up the future of work and talent in very dark, foreboding terms. My hope is we'll surface some talent types of companies here that actually are doing great things for the people side of what they're doing. Who's first here? I think Moises, what's your nominee for talent future-proofing companies?
No, I have a couple of picks, and I think it's depending on how you interpret the talent piece. For me, one of the ones that has been incredibly effective in how they manage their talent and really future thinking is, the name is just slipped me. I had it in my memory. It's Simple Lab. It's a small startup that is leveraging the expertise of labs in the country and making that accessible to the everyday consumer. So basically what they're doing is taking all the different and difficult language of water quality into a very simple way to interpret. So what they're doing is bringing talent that really understands water and understands consumers, and simplify that experience. So today, if you wanted to have your water tested, typically go through one of these labs and you get a very complicated report. What they've done is really made that a very simple process. And they do that by really bringing people that have that technical background with a lot of user experience, which I don't think is typically something that you see in the general lab space.
Wonderful. I love it. And you probably know, have you worked with them before, given any of your...
That's one of the startups I met through our work. So I was looking to find companies that related a little bit to our work in the space. And, we've done a lot of research in this space, and we realized that water quality is something that people are becoming more aware of, especially more in the pandemic, but not, I mean, even the last with things like Flint and so forth, but it's something that is really not understood. So when someone, I think, is able to really bridge that, there's going to be a breakthrough there.
Nice. Awesome. George, healthcare example? Oh, you're muted, I think, now.
Can you hear me?
Yep, totally.
Okay. So, I'm going to, from the healthcare lens, ideally for me, it would be, it reminds me a little bit of politics. The people that make the sausage should eat the sausage. There's a group out of Alaska called the South Central Foundation. They're a healthcare organization that delivers care, but mostly to the native population there. But what's interesting about it is that the CEO, all the care providers, everyone is part of that community. So, again, they eat the sausage they make. And I find it interesting that, when people typically talk about talent, right, you're thinking about, pedigree or accomplishments or whatnot. To me, especially when it comes to something like healthcare, it's commitment. And are you committed to delivering and doing the best you can? I'd rather than, I hope I'm not offending anyone, I'd rather have the close to best person in the world trying their best than the best person who's half-assing it, because that means I'm not going to get the care I need. And the South Central Foundation has found a way to do that by finding people that are all aligned towards delivering high-quality care at a low cost and trying to make sure that people feel like they're being taken care of. And it's odd to talk about this because it seems like either A, it's too idealized, or B, that it should be like that already. But anyone that's been in even touched the healthcare system, at least in the United States, in the last 2 decades, realizes it's not like that and should be.
I guess it's a cardinal rule that if you are involved in the experience itself, you can see it from a different prism and maybe try to improve it from the inside out, right? Yeah.
Especially if you and your loved ones have to be, using it at some point. You'd like to make sure that it's good.
Great example. Andrea?
So you'll think that I was listening to them in the back room, but I wasn't. I picked Alliance for Africa. I heard one of the founders, Alex Tasato, who's a good friend and a part of the Gray Swan Guild. He wrote a really great POV point of view for the Gray Swan Guild recently. And he was working at NVIDIA and very well experienced in AI. He's from Africa, and so he started a group with some really talented people who are committed to bringing AI education to Africa. And he gave a presentation to a very large conference a couple days ago, and I heard it. And he had a great slide that said, we have to go from being seekers of aid to makers of our next generation. And the thought of putting the tools in the hands of people and teaching people the AI, and and he shows all the graphs of what happens if we don't. And seeker of aid is not a tenable situation for anybody. And I think that they're really onto something important. And I could tell from the people at the table in this conference the other day that they're making a big inroads in something really important. So it's called Alliance for Africa, Alliance for Africa, and it's artificial intelligence and technology education for Africa.
And I was impressed upon his stuff, Andrea, that, a lot of times there's this savior mentality of the developed world that we're going to go to Africa and we're going to cure and solve everything. And I just love his attitude around, like, we can produce our own solutions, right? Like, we're just, we're lacking some things, but yeah, So
yeah, I mean, and the one thing, not to get into all this because I know we're time limited, but it's universal. I think that's one of the things the pandemic has taught us is we're all kind of on our own out here, right? So I've learned how to fix my own computer, and everybody's learned how to do things, and it's like we're all makers now. So I think it's a universal spirit of wanting to be self-sufficient, and the tools have gotten so much easier. When a 7-year-old can use Raspberry Pi and build a robot, it's like, okay, it's gotten to the point where we can all do this.
Well, in the same vein, I've chosen 2 consulting examples as my my talent examples here. I've looked at a lot of different models over the last little while, and I guess there's a begrudging respect for Bain as a company. Just for the last 12 years, they have been one of the only three companies I think have been on Glassdoor's kind of top-rated list of companies for the entire history of their thing. So even though Deloitte may have great people and great people practice and stuff, Bain's been the only one that is actually, I think they were 3rd this year. So I think for a demanding population that probably is overworked and overstressed, it's amazing how much their employees rally around them in terms of their focus on personal development and being able to move into different sectors if you want to. So that was one consulting example. And the other one I always bring up for people is a company out of the UK called Eden McCallum. And they've essentially brought up the notion that why do you need a business card to be a good consultant for somebody? And so they've built an on-demand consultancy that brings together, much like Upwork would bring together people that could do basic level activities like graphic design and kind of data tabulation and stuff. They've built a global network of consultants that actually come together like a movie project and then go their separate way after they've done an engagement, which I found quite interesting. So those are my 2 in that one. All right, we've got our 4th category. I'm going to let Moises go first here because I know you've got a hard stop at some point, just in case we have to get out of here early. The last category is transformation. Myself and Andrea love companies that actually have been taking their cruise ship and decide, you know what, this cruise ship's got to turn a little bit or a lot this way. Maybe you've got a great example here, Moises.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I think, great examples in the world of that, but I'll use my former employer, Allstate Insurance, a traditional and the largest home and auto insurance company, basically utilizing a business model that it's very traditional, that depends on regulation, but with an eye on a change in the future that will really be, where risk will be assessed differently with the use of artificial intelligence and data. So in order to actually make the change, they created another company that I don't think is very well known, but it's pretty large. It's called Arity. And I believe they have about 400 employees right now. They actually put it in a different location. So Allstate is in the north suburbs of Chicago. Arity is in downtown, the Merchandise Mart, right at the center of where technology is happening. And basically, this company is serving anyone that has mobility data needs. So they serve Allstate as their customer, but they can also serve anyone in the ecosystem or even their competition. And really that, I think, is putting an edge on the ability they have to collect, analyze, in a mass and analyze data in very unique ways. So for me, that was a major shift. Right now they're in parallel paths, but I think at some point, they may come back together.
Are they Allstate branded, Moises, or they have their separate brand and that connection to the parent company is pretty loose?
It's pretty loose. Yeah, it's a different company. It's fully owned by Allstate, but it's a different company.
Yeah,
completely independent.
Interesting. Perhaps I'm learning there too in terms of how big companies. There's the 2 different strategies of like, do you have it tied and tethered to the parent or allow it to be different? Yeah. George, an example of transformation.
I'm going to go with Eli Lilly. The big thing in healthcare now is something called value-based contracting. To really, really summarize it, when you get a drug, basically you're depending on studies that were done 5, 10, 20 years ago that may or may not really be relevant to you. More importantly, they may not actually show the results later on. Most drug companies have been happy with that because it's more money in the bank. That, along with what they used to call the blockbuster model, meaning I give a whole bunch of people the drug, even though a fraction of them really will get the benefit, meant a lot of billions of dollars in the coffers. Eli Lilly, well, basically many drug companies have been pushed back now because we're in the age of big data. If I'm an insurance company and I'm paying for it, I mean, I think Kaiser even started this back in the day. I can analyze all the results of all the drugs that I bought from you, and if they're not matching up to what you said would happen, why should I be paying for this? A lot of drug companies, as you might imagine, fought back against this. But I think it was about 5-6 years ago, Eli Lilly said, you know what? Let's do the right thing for the patient. Let's see what we can do. We're willing to put some of what you would compensate us for at risk. We will do performance-based measures and outcomes. And if it doesn't do what we say it's going to do based on your population, we'll pay you back. Or you can pay us if we hit certain targets. That type of almost insuring your product in drugs is unheard of, especially if you're already locked into making billions of dollars. And a lot of drug companies like Pfizer and whatnot have fought it because why should they? But given where we are in 2020 with big data, with people, demanding privacy for their data, being able to own it or control access for it, and the price of drugs being so high, it becomes really important now to be able to put your money where your mouth is. And in this case, I believe Eli Lilly is willing to put their business model at risk and change to do that.
It's so interesting, the performance-based outcome model. Like I think as much as you said it's a healthcare thing, it really is in a world where you can prove whether something delivered or not. I think it's the same in advertising. It's the same in sales. It's like there's a lot of interesting business models in the future based on, we'll stand behind our product, right? So interesting.
There's also a lot of risk too, though. And I think that's something that Sean, I think all of us, when you set up a measure, right, you perform to the measure. And you have to really make sure that measures getting the right outcome you want. And I think that's something that we're all going to have to be on the lookout for as these things move forward.
We were mentioning in a previous webinar too, just different insurance products that in a pandemic, when even you're delivering and all of a sudden you have a world cataclysmic event like that, which are becoming, when you look at global climate, when you're looking at cybersecurity, the risks are manifold and sometimes out of your control. So it's maybe something that may prevent that model from being widespread over the next few years. Andrea, you're a transformation nominee.
This is going to be obvious and completely not obvious at the same time. It's Salesforce. And I watch the way people lead when no one's watching and when they don't have to. And I watch Mark Benioff and I think, he didn't have to talk to Jack Ma against the will of Donald Trump, et cetera, to get some face masks delivered from China, like overnight Jet Express. He didn't have to do that. He's running a software company last time we checked. We know someone who was on one of our webcasts who's running a transformation effort. Ironically, it's a transformation effort within finance. Well, once again, they're compliant. They're doing all the right things. They get top talent. Why would they need to do this? Well, because they see the long view is to be able to stay ahead of what their customers are looking at. They see so much because they have such a large reach that they thought, physician, heal thyself. There you go. I was trying to make a blend there. Let's do to ourselves what we're preaching to all of our customers. And so they just said, okay, we're going to do a transformation when we don't have to get ahead of what finance needs to look like in the future. Data visualization, all the things that you can put off for a long time, get a lot of technical debt. But if you're going to double the size of the company, which is what she told us they're wanting to do, I mean, you can't have tech debt. You need to solve that. But wait, there's more. So I was pretty impressed. I'm thinking, okay, this guy, he builds hospitals, he flies around, he gets things to happen. But when the George Floyd thing happened, it's really hard for a non-African American male to say anything that's not tone deaf. It's hard for a company to not sound like they're doing a slogan, kind of like COVID. We care about you. Can you please buy another shirt? And that was a moment that was super tough. I think it was tough for leaders to know what to do. And I just observed a lot of deer in the headlights, just like, wow, this is not what we were prepared for. And I'll tell you, what I heard from how Salesforce handled it was he knew when to step aside, let the people with the stories be the ones with the stage, and understood that there's moments where leaders, by not being the heroic, jump on a plane and bring all the ventilators home, but being not that guy. And I watched how he, I wasn't there, but, according to the telling, had these events throughout the company that was not, we're going to hire this and we're going to knee-jerk reaction that. It was, let's learn together. And I feel like that just felt so exactly right that it struck me as a new leadership transformation approach. You don't have to be Jack Welch anymore. And nothing wrong with him for the time, but this feels like a time where we need to be really learning some things and listening to people we haven't had to listen to. Our children are going to be in charge of our companies in about 2 months, right? All the people of a certain age are getting laid off, and there's going to be new voices, hopefully, in our government, and we have to just have those moments. So I liked him for the ventilators. I loved him for the moment of not talking, not being on the stage.
Well, you've influenced me here then, Andrea. Your heartfelt thing. I had 2 or 3 nominees in this thing, but given what you've said, and I think your thought about transformationists really are good listeners, right? I think you got to be a good listener before you're a good actor. So I'm going to avoid talking about Intuit or Adobe and how they've transitioned as software companies into something else. And I'm going to avoid Schneider Electric, even though I know we know people there that have gone from being kind of an electrical component company to an IoT company. I think BlackRock for me is an interesting example. So big investment company. If you go to the front page of their website now, it looks nothing like it probably did last year. And they've put 750 billion into a fund all around positive impacts on the world. So it tends to have been that most corporate social responsibility stuff ends up being in a very satellite department inside a company that doesn't have a lot of teeth at the executive table, and you add some sprinkle dust and we'll hope that things work out. I think BlackRock was maybe at the leading edge of a trend here that I'm seeing, that impact on the community and the world really is important, and that real money should be spent here. And so they've now got a mission where across the company they don't invest in any companies that don't have women on a seat, at least one woman on a seat on the board. They must kind of hit at least a few climate kind of things that require some investment, or you don't get money from one of the biggest investment houses in the world. So I think, I don't know what movie it is, but Follow the Money. Well, I mean, if you follow the money here, it looks like money at least has a somewhat smilier face on it now. So those are my examples. We got a great collection. What we do at the end of these things is we kind of go around the horn and ask people what we've learned. So maybe, Andrea, I'll let you start on this one, and maybe I'll go around to all 4 of you and see what we've learned.
I'm feeling much more optimistic than I thought I would. I forget how much talent is out there doing the right thing. And I was inspired. I learned from Moises. I mean, I learned about, I should have known about Mercado Libre, but I didn't. So that's a big blind spot for me. I'm going to go learn about. And I had heard about Intermountain, but I hadn't heard about Civica RX. So I learned from George, and I just feel like it's this fantastic moment of, like it takes a good pandemic to get us to just notice the positive sometimes. And I've been feeling like healthcare especially was so sluggish and was never going to get it. And, overnight, it's just had to get it. And so I'm actually feeling a lot more optimistic than I was at the beginning of this hour. So thanks to George and Moises for exposing me to some really cool businesses to look at.
George, revelations, discoveries?
I need to get out of healthcare more often and talk to you guys so I can hear more about these other examples. Partially because, variety's the spice, but partially because healthcare has always been kind of the lagging indicator, if you will, of how things have transformed. It's nice to know that we've got these little lights of innovation and disruption in some cases happening, but we truly only learn by talking to other industries. I think a lot of the examples you all gave were really encouraging to me, because in a lot of cases, whether it's, I think the Simplify Labs that you talked about, Moises, where it takes something very complex and simplifies it so that a layman who doesn't have that technical background can start to understand what's going on with something important to them. I think that's a trend that's going to continue within every industry, including healthcare. there has to be this type of democratization of information. It can't be all kind of held up by expertise or in silos or whatnot. So I'm encouraged by that because hopefully that allows people to have a better life. Andrea, I was also thinking about what you said before about the transformation of healthcare because of COVID. Maybe it's one of the cynical thoughts that went through my head is we went through change that we haven't been to do for 20 years in 2 months in terms of telemedicine, in terms of cross licensing to allow doctors to go across borders, releasing medications quickly for people to use. We can talk about that offline as to why some of that was, but there was some good thinking behind some of it. I think in my mind, that shows that there was a lot of inertia that was man-made. We could have done this anytime. So why don't we? And hopefully I'm not the only person having that aha moment where we can actually take care of other people and not worry about, well, this might affect the bottom line or the worlds might collide. No, didn't happen. And we all pulled together. So let's do it again.
Wow. I'm ready to walk over the hot coals with you there, George. This is great. And Moises, kind of thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the area where I work. I'm pretty far from healthcare, so I think a lot of the learnings come from that side. So George, it should be good that you have had examples that were close to your area of expertise, and it's encouraging, as Andrea mentioned, to see that a sector that we've always felt lags behind is trying to find ways to serve all of its stakeholders in new ways, and that's very long needed. I wish we had some examples like that on education. That's an area that I think also needs a lot of innovation, and I haven't seen a lot there. I don't know if you guys had seen it. I'm going to be curious. After you go through all the different award nominees, if there are any education ones. I know there are some examples there, but it's an area that I'm seeing a lot of under stress. My daughter is first year of college, and I'm seeing just how they are managing this whole situation. You wish they managed that a little more like an enterprise that it's trying to serve their customers. So anyway, those are my learnings.
Yeah, great ones. And I think more to follow potentially. I know we did have some discussion on education, but I think they're on the fringes. They're not in the core of what we call education. So I think the same thing might be for government as well. And it's amazing when you unfreeze constraints, how things kind of magically can materialize. My hope is that same spirit continues. I'm just going to share screen here. We're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping at the end of this before we exit. First of all, I really want to thank George and Moises for bringing their A game to the table today. Despite their love in on the Michigan Wolverines, as I joined the call earlier, just they have
best state ever. What do you mean, Sean? I don't understand.
Shown themselves to be true citizens of the world, not just of that beloved university. So, as I mentioned, we're going to have nominations start up on June 29th. So we'd love to hear about your own thoughts in terms of all these different categories from a variety of different industries. I'm really looking forward to this. And my hope is, as I mentioned earlier, George and Moises might play a role in terms of determining some of the winners down the road. I'm giving Andrea an extra week break on our next webcast. We're not doing it every 2 weeks. We're going to take an extra week because it's summer. On July 14th, we're talking about the future of work and culture and leadership. That should be a good one, given what I've seen over the last 4 months, both good and bad. We have a newsletter. We think it's pretty smart. We'll obviously probably surface this webcast on there at some point in the near future. Join if you're so inclined. And we've also kind of convened and curated a group of about 200 sense makers around the world. We've just newly minted it. It's called the Gray Swan Guild. Everybody came passionate to the table back in March. We wrote a post, which turned into a group of people, which turned into a bigger group of people, and now has turned into a website and a publication that is trying to make sense of the pandemic and where it's headed toward the future. So jump to grayswanguild.org if you're interested in trying to know what's around the corner from the pandemic. Myself and Andrea are launching a book next month. We'll do the shameless self-promotion next month. We'll leave it just as a slide for now. Right, Andrea? Yeah?
Right.
Okay.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
Congratulate us when it's actually out there in a world of at least not crisis mode pandemic when we were originally thinking about launching at Moises. So once
Sean,
again,
we're at home. We got to read something. So, I mean, it's perfect timing.
yeah, no, true. We miss you. Well, it's summertime. Good summertime patio reading. So I really want to thank not only George and Moises, but all of our panelists that came to the table. The amount of new information and new discoveries I had was great. So this has been one of our best kind of discovery sessions, I think, that we've ever had, Andrea. So thank you. Thank you, Andrea, my co-host again. And we'll just do the sharp break and say we'll be seeing you at some point in the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.